5915 that was brought up last year, and it discusses protecting urban agriculture, making sure that state governments and the federal government is not overregulating individuals who are gardening in their backyard. House Resolution 5915 is going through the process and is expected to become into law. And it makes sure that urban agricultural facilities, hubs, are being taken care of rather than being overregulated and being overly dealt with, which drives people away. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks Trey. My question to you would be, you talked a lot about the negative side effects of state regulations and driving people away from urban agriculture. If you could, and if there is any, what would be a positive of regulations for urban agriculture?
Definitely. I think a positive regulation for urban agriculture could be food safety. A lot of families are concerned about their food safety, even in just simple farming. Whether it be farms that produce stuff and put it to the market, a lot of families are concerned that it's been oversprayed and overmanaged and that those chemicals are going to harm them. However, I also think that there are such things as pests and bugs and insects that could carry parasites into you that you may eat from your backyard. So I feel like government regulation on spraying, making sure that your gardens are being taken care of, and getting rid of pests could help prevent families from becoming overly sick and making sure that families do not get those pests and do not get those parasites. So I think a positive way, a positive regulation may be that of making sure families are taking care of their produce in the idea of food safety and food security.
Thank you, Trey. My question for you is, you describe a sense of self-efficacy that's gained from this influx of urban agriculture. What effects could you see this having on local or state economies?
Definitely. So we see agriculture as a huge thing in the American economy. So many middle-class Americans farm in order to make their life livable. And we see that with the rising prices and inflation on small things like food, groceries, gas, or even basic necessities is causing a burden on middle-class families. And I feel that overregulation may cause more burdens on those middle-class families. A lot of the economy thrives off of the idea of farming, and bigger cities like Los Angeles thrive off the idea of urban agriculture. Farms send their produce to small town markets. Small town markets sell that produce, make money for themselves, make money for that farm. And so I feel that economies can benefit from urban agriculture. Rooftop farming is a prime example of that. Los Angeles, a lot of rooftop farms send their stuff to local markets, not big name companies, local markets. So that way they're making a living rather than supporting larger companies that ultimately don't really need that income. So I feel that sending those rooftop farming produce into those smaller markets can help smaller town stores, shops, and markets grow. And that's a big thing here in Montana, is small town stores. So I feel if we embrace the idea of selling urban agricultural produce in small town stores, our economy could thrive.
Trey, you talked about, it kind of seems like if urban ag doesn't exist in a place, the alternative is production ag. Can you talk a little bit about how our urban agriculturalists as well as maybe a more traditional production agriculturalist can work together?
I guess not. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm already. Hi, I'm Emma Lou Slifka from Winifred, and my topic was how should the success of urban farming be determined? Urban agriculture is defined as the act of participating in agriculture in a populated area with limited space. People do this to feel connected with agriculture and grow their own produce or other resources. So, urban farming has been growing in popularity for several years. In fact, currently there are 800 million individuals who participate in urban farming today. How do you determine the success of 8 million people? Before we can do that, we have to break it down into the 3 main sections of urban farming. Those are community-supported farming, such as farmers markets, outdoor farming, such as outdoor gardens or rooftop gardens, and indoor farming, such as aquaponics, hydroponics, and vertical towers. Let's start with community-supported farming. Community-supported farming can be defined in success by by how much money they are making and if they are meeting their goals. For example, Farming Concrete produces an online template that you can go in and fill in for free and determine if you are making the right amount of money for how much work and money you are putting into it. Next, outdoor farming, such as rooftop gardening or outdoor gardening. I have a cousin who lives in California, and he, a few years ago, decided to participate in his apartment's complex rooftop garden. His own goals was to learn more about farming, connect with agriculture, and learn a new hobby. And he met his individual goals, therefore, he experienced success. Finally, indoor farming, such as hydroponics, aquaponics, and vertical towers. This comes down to your own personal goals and what you value or why you were inspired to start this task. For example, several years ago, my school decided that they were going to put in a hydroponic system and vertical towers. We spent months and even up to a year researching, putting together, and setting up these systems. And one day, we were finally able to plant our first lettuce. Our goal was to provide the school with lettuce and the store with lettuce. And in a few months, we met our goal. We were not only able to supply the store and the school with lettuce, but we were also able to supply our local booster club with lettuce for during concessions or during ball games. So, the success of urban agriculture comes down to your own personal goals. Why were you inspired to start this? Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We have a few questions for you. My first one is, how can FFA members contribute to the success of urban agriculture?
So, as FFA grows as an organization, we are seeing more and more urban chapters become part of our great organization. I believe that FFA members who are part of urban chapters can start their own urban agriculture within their communities. I believe using the school as a resource is a great way to incorporate this into not only your school, but into your urban FFA chapter. Those who are part of rural FFA chapters can help the urban kids understand more about the agricultural process.
Thank you, Emma. My question for you relates more directly to the indoor farming aspect of your speech. I'm wondering what sort of effects you see on the conservation efforts toward conserving resources. If you see any benefits or drawbacks in that.
I think there are definitely benefits to starting an indoor farm. Like I said, my school has a vertical farm and a hydroponic system, and we are able to use all of the rain shed from our school's building in our hydroponic system. So we have a tank that collects all of this water. We put this water through a filtration system, and then we are able to transfer that into our towers. Now this water is going to recycle itself until it has been absorbed by the plants. So unlike a lot of farming practices where you're putting water and it goes into the ground, this is being recycled, so it can definitely have a benefit on preserving some resources.
Awesome, thank you. And my question to you, you talked about your cousin who lives in a larger city and how he took part in his community in their farm. What were some challenges that you think they run into in more suburban areas than we do? Obviously, here in Montana, we have unlimited resources for this farming aspect, but as far as conserving those resources in those larger cities, what do you think the biggest challenges today are?
I believe the biggest challenge that he probably faced was the resource of water and probably the resource of soil. Like I said, he was facing the issue of having a rooftop farm, which means he was having to transfer all of the water and all of the soil up 30 flights of stairs in order to get it to his personal garden. I believe this would be a major issue and a major challenge, but I know in the end he knew that the work was worth it because he was learning more about agriculture and about the process.
What is the role of urban ag in helping to further ag literacy and advocacy efforts on behalf of the industry?
So as we know, right now there is a large gap between farm to plate, consumer to producer. We are experiencing people becoming more and more removed from agriculture. This gives us a way to bring agriculture into the urban areas and help educate them on exactly what agriculture is, what the practice is, and what we truly believe. It's a bridge between urban and rural, and it helps us connect and understand each other.
So you talked about 3 different types of urban ag. How do you know what the correct type is for your area?
This is going to come down to your own personal situation. For example, if you have a garden or a big backyard, then being able to start an outdoor garden is a great option for you. If you have limited outdoor space, but you have an area in your kitchen where you can set up a vertical tower, then that's a great option for you. It really comes down to the individual's wants and needs and what they aspire to get from urban agriculture. Are their goals to bring their produce to a farmer's market, or are their goals to just provide their family with produce? It's going to depend on the scale that you want it to come down to. There are so many online resources to help people start urban farming and to help them understand just how much produce they are going to receive from how much work they put in or how large of a vertical farm or garden that they have.
Hey, Emilu, how would a community or school get started in urban ag if they don't necessarily have the funds?
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
I'm Heiner from the Wheatland FFA. My topic is the Food and Agricultural Organization says the road to resilience is paved with good governance. What does good governance look like? As FFA members, we have all been impacted by agriculture. We all know why we need it, and we all know what comes out of it. But with an increasing global population, food insecurity, and a whole lot more issues, good governance is required for us to be able to continue to be agriculturalists. In a write-up in 2018, the United Nations, or the UN, said that good governance is three things: ethics, equity, and justice. Now, how do we practice all three of these things? Well, starting off with ethics. Being transparent and being held accountable for the agriculture that we produce, whether it's the government or the producers. I know a lot of times going through agriculture, we like to think that we're doing everything right and we're saying everything that is to be said. But are we really? I gave a speech a while back about putting yourself into the shoes of the consumer. How would you feel seeing everything that goes on in the agricultural industry? Would you feel that everything is transparent? Now we take a step back and we actually think about what's transparent. We think about what's going on in the world and if we are actually telling them what we can tell them. When we practice this good governance, it allows us to make more money, get ourselves out there, and all around be better agriculturalists, which moves us into the next part, equity. When we are equitable and we practice these good practices, we do make more money. We impede on economic growth and we help the industry. Right now, as we all know, taxes are way up for agriculturalists, and tax season just came around. If we don't practice these equitable practices, how are we supposed to pay taxes and have a good farm and ranch? We can't. Well, once we practice these equitable practices and the transparency, we know we have to be held accountable for this. Whether it's the government or ourselves, we are required to do this. Accountability is the most important part of good governance. Do you hold yourself accountable for everything that happens on your agricultural operation? I know I don't. When I'm sitting there with my dad and we're working on something and something goes wrong and it's my fault, I don't take the blame. So do you think that big ranches, big corporations do the same? No. When we practice this accountability, we are able to embrace a better lifestyle. We are able to embrace a better and good governance. It makes it easier for us. Good governance is the practice of ethics, equitability, and justice. That justice is the accountability. Knowing that we have to hold ourselves accountable for what goes on, or else nothing can grow. And finally, with a good governance plan, such as diversification of crops, or putting yourself into the shoes of the consumer, or holding yourself accountable for what goes on, we can grapple against the growing global population. We are able to have more equitable strategies, and all around, we hold a better agricultural industry. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Ram. So my question to you, you talked a lot about putting ourselves in the consumer's shoes. And there are a lot of these consumers nowadays that don't see the day-to-day activities of farming, ranching. So what needs to improve in the future generation, in your upcoming generation, what needs to improve to further ourselves down this road of resilience that the consumers can see and that they can be a part of so they know the changes of improvements that we are trying in the agriculture industry?
Well, we have something called agritourism, going and seeing the practices of agriculturalists and how they pertain to our daily life, such as the Montana Ag Tour for FFA members. If we were to create something that everybody from all over can go and do these, see honey production, see beef production, see what a 240-acre farm looks like. Something that's small but meaningful. Agritourism is a way for consumers to put themselves into the shoes of the producers and see what all is going on everywhere.
Can you give an example of a time when a part of the agriculture industry or maybe a company needed to be held accountable and how that situation played out?
So in the horse meat scandal in 2016, there was a whole bunch of people that were thinking all this horse meat was going around, and because companies were actually putting horse meat onto people's plates, whether it was in school cafeterias or whether it was just at a community banquet, horse meat was being replaced with beef. All 4 of the major food packers were doing this. They need to be held accountable for the meat not being what they were saying it was.
So back to the 3 key points that the UN had made. How does the state of Montana practice those 3 big components?
Well, first off, ethics. While all of us are being here and learning more about agriculture, we are being more ethical. We are learning how to be transparent and accountable and learn these new practices that allow us to be better. Now we talk about equity, farm and business management, sales. These contests and these practices in FFA develop more into the agricultural leaders of tomorrow. When we practice FBM, we have to do, frankly, quite a bit of math, and we learn a lot. That's how we practice the equitable side of it. Now, when we practice justice, I would say that that's probably the most lacking part, wherever you go. People more often than not aren't held accountable, and that is why I don't think that we have a great governance strategy.
Awesome. So you're talking a lot about this good governance and holding people accountable. What is the next step for you? Because we all know it's easier said than done. What is the next step that you're going to take to make sure that these producers are held accountable to their actions?
So I'm going into agricultural education. And in order to teach people that you have to be accountable, you need to start at a young age. Demonstrating to the FFA kids and anybody doing anything that if you're accountable, people look at that and they see they need to be accountable as well. So the way I would do it is I'm going to teach my kids, this is how you have to be. You have to be accountable for what you do, because if you're not, who is? So that's my plan.
What is the agriculture industry's biggest area for growth in terms of specifically equity?
I think that one thing that we can work on, especially in Montana, is diversification. When we look back at FBM, we see that more diverse operations have a lot less risk. Risk leads into equitability. When we have an operation that can both farm and ranch, then they have 2 different ways of producing money. So the growth that we all have is on how we can be more diverse in our operations in order to reduce the risk of not making money.
My question is, what standards or laws do you see a need for to help reach these goals, and what steps can you take to advocate for that?
I think that there's quite a few leeways to get out of paying taxes and do I go? That was bad as fuck. That was rough.
Appreciate it. We shouldn't need this anymore, so.
I'm Reagan Long from the Shields Valley FFA chapter. My topic is, are U.S. agriculturists making progress in the conversation about GMO misinformation? Whenever I open my chemistry textbook, I often see confusing terms such as stoichiometry or what a supersaturated solution may be. In order to grasp an understanding of what I am reading and to better understand the topic, I often have to consult the index located at the back of the textbook. We often encounter examples of an index in our everyday lives through the application of food labels. These food labels give us an understanding of what is inside of an agricultural product, as well as any risks that may go along with it. A big part of a food label often has a familiar term about GMOs. We constantly hear about products being non-GMO, or this product company does not use GMOs within its facility. There are a lot of connotations that put GMOs in an often negative light. One of the biggest things about GMOs is that they often cause allergic reactions or put consumers at a higher risk of having allergic reactions. The reason about this argument is an empty argument. The FDA has actually stated that if there is an allergy to, say, peanuts, for example, an individual who has an allergy to peanuts will also have an allergy to the GMO counterpart. This is the same for somebody who does not have an allergy. If there is a GMO product that has peanuts in it, I will not have an allergy to that if I do not have an allergy to a non-GMO product that also has peanuts in it. The FDA, EPA, and USDA also regulate GMOs rigorously, making sure that they are not only within regulations, but that they are providing no extra risk to consumers. Another big myth about GMOs is that they often not only cause allergic reactions, but aren't well regulated. The USDA, EPA, and FDA all work very hard to make sure that there are regulations on GMOs to make sure that this new scientific practice is being explored safely and that consumers are being exposed to it appropriately. Constant research has concluded that GMOs are no riskier than their conventional counterparts. A study by the PLOS ONE Scientific Journal and Institute reviewed over 1,700 scientific articles and concluded that GMOs do not pose risks that are any greater than those of their conventional counterparts. Additional regulations upon GMOs only fortify this understanding and make sure that there are no additional harms towards consumers. Lastly, one big argument against GMOs is that GMOs may threaten biodiversity. On the flip side, GMOs specific target genes and traits within an agricultural product. They actually promote productiveness in biodiversity and help produce resilience to harmful substances within crops. This reduces the need for harmful pesticides or insecticides and actually helps make sure that biodiversity is preserved. Making sure that GMOs are used safely is not a new concept. Regulations by a number of agencies have helped make this fact strong. Agriculturists are playing an important role in not only ensuring that our food safety is preserved through GMOs, but are using legislation to make sure that consumers are properly informed about GMOs and related education. One such bill was introduced in the United States Congress this past June. H.R. 913 is an example of one such bill that cuts red tape and helped to revise wording within EPA regulations for GMOs, making sure that wording was more specific to precisely what GMOs were targeting and any potential side effects that may occur. agriculturists are working with farming cooperatives, various legislative practices and firms to make sure that consumers are properly informed about GMOs and the safety of this new scientific practice. Because GMOs have not been around for a long time and are a relatively new technology, there's a lot of uncertainty about what these technologies may hold. It is our job as consumers and members of the agriculture industry to make sure that we are working with agriculturists in our community to understand the knowledge produced by scientific firms and journals, and to better understand GMOs and how they may affect us now and in the future. So next time you go to the grocery store and you purchase an agricultural product and you see that index that is located on the back of the box, remember what the non-GMO sticker means and how this might not be putting you at any more risk than a product that does not have that specific label. GMO knowledge is not only something we should focus on now, but with the increasing presence of this technology, understanding this for the future is more important than ever. Thank you.
Thank you. My question for you is, you spoke a lot about the safety and education surrounding the safety of GMO products, and it sounds like a large piece of this puzzle is the fact that labels are able to market things as non-GMO. So what aspects of marketing regulations do you see may need influenced by that?
That's a great question, and one of those things about marketing is that having a non-GMO label it's not producing information that is considered misinformation. If a product is non-GMO, that would be 100% factual and is doing its part as a portion of a food label to correctly inform consumers about the content of the agricultural product. But having marketing be a part of these food labels is a very big thing, especially with GMOs being considered negative by even the general public or people who may be uninformed about this technology. Marketing regulations could help specify that GMOs are not included in any unnecessary moves to target products that might be conflicting, because they do use GMO products within whatever the company produces. Having further regulations on specifying if information on a label should be addressed in a format that is not used as a marketing tactic. That could include taking down the color, the font size, whatever it may be on the label, and make it a little more uniform to align with standards for typical food labels a little more effectively.
Thanks, Reagan. So this conversation about GMOs is one that the ag industry has been fighting for a while, right? Is it possible to win that fight, and what would it take?
Because this fight has been ongoing and the introduction of GMOs into the agricultural industry has been recent, there isn't necessarily an end in sight for this discussion about GMOs. But the biggest thing that we can do to make sure that people are properly informed about GMOs and how they are regulated is to use education, especially in areas that might be urban or people who may not have a familiarity with agriculture, and to make sure that GMO education is at the forefront of this discussion. Cutting back on norms or misunderstanding of scientific technologies is one of the biggest ways that we can play a role in making sure that people are properly informed about GMO technologies. Addressing the reality that GMOs are not going to go away. This technology is something that is going to remain in the agricultural industry, is a big fact that many consumers need to be made aware of. Using social media platforms to promote scientific reasoning and factual information is one of the biggest ways that we can help make sure that this discussion goes towards a progressive direction and that GMO information is properly understood.
Thank you. You briefly kind of just touched on my question to you, and you talked a lot about the USDA and the FDA regulations that they have against using GMOs to these producers. What other changes can be made to the producers from the consumers and the producers to inform them about these GMOs? What regulations can be changed or improved to better the understanding on GMOs and how they're used in the agriculture industry?
And because GMOs are such a recent technology, there is the sense of increased regulations that are produced by a lot of these agencies. And with increased regulation often comes a decreased sense of understanding. Having a lot more red tape over GMOs and a lot of regulations for how they can be applied by producers often creates an issue that is very convoluted. Making sure that FDA and USDA and EPA regulations are more specific, or maybe even some that may be unnecessary, are ways that people can better understand GMOs and why certain aspects of this technology may be regulated. That question does relate to HR 913, as the main purpose of that bill was to slash red tape on a lot of these regulations and make sure that what the FDA was trying, and EPA in that instance, was trying to do, is make sure that they're getting specific. Thank you.